I said a year ago this was the beginning of a new Cold War with Russia. It certainly is that and more. I think we can say today that it's really a hot war, not just with Russia and Ukraine, but more broadly between Russia and NATO. Of course, it's a proxy war because NATO is providing such an extraordinary amount of military support, intelligence support, and training for the Ukrainians. So when you talk to the Russians and when you see Russian media, when you see the Russian government, they are all talking about the fact that they aren't just fighting Ukraine, they're fighting NATO. And that's why they're losing. And of course, this means that the war is going to get a lot more dangerous because we're not just talking about what the Russians do on the ground in Ukraine, we're also talking about asymmetric warfare, cyber attacks, fiber attacks, pipeline attacks, espionage, disinformation, terrorism. I mean, this is what happens when you have a rogue state. Just as Iran has been a rogue state in the Middle East, we're talking about the way Russia is going to be behaving towards NATO. That's, I think, the concern going forward. I think there's an open question about whether or not this is a Russia fight with NATO or it's becoming something broader. Certainly, so far in the first year, the Chinese, friends, partners of the Russians, but they have not participated in the war at all. They've not provided military support for Russia. They've not been breaking sanctions. And they haven't really put their thumb on one side or the other of this conflict. They've been neutral, just as the Indians have been neutral, just as most of the developing world has been neutral. Now, we are starting to see the Chinese put more public pressure on NATO countries against providing military support for Ukraine. We're talking about the Chinese calling for an immediate ceasefire. The only way you're going to stop this war is if the two combatants understand that a ceasefire is something they're willing to come to terms with. I mean, neither of these combatants are willing to do that. At this point, the Ukrainians, at a minimum, want to take back all the territory that they lost since February 24th, very understandably, given the war crimes, given the millions of refugees, given the tens of thousands of lives lost, civilian and soldiers. The Russians, of course, have mobilized hundreds of thousands of men. They're fighting this war at immense economic cost. It's Putin's war, and he has not accomplished what he wants to accomplish. He's annexed illegally 4 territories in Ukraine. He doesn't occupy them all. So at this point, neither side believes they're in a position that they are prepared for a ceasefire or to end the war. And I certainly don't see the developed world prepared to press that outcome.